Welcome everyone to this panel discussion, How Auditing Helps Prevent Tragedy. I'm Mike Richmond, your host for Exemplar Global's Excellence in Auditing Expo 2024. Thanks for joining us. Well, today we're joined by two terrific panelists to have an interesting discussion, hopefully, about how, again, auditing can help prevent tragedy. Ajay Arora is President and CEO of QMII, and Wendy Edwards is Project Director here at Exemplar Global. So these two professionals are going to share some of their unique insights and experiences that are going to help us explore the nature of some recent and fairly well-known quality failures and the actions that auditors might be able to take to help prevent or at least mitigate some of the worst outcomes of these problems. We're hoping that this is going to be a freewheeling and inspiring, hopefully inspiring session that's going to teach all of us a little bit about the power that we all have to positively affect our organizations for which we work. So with that, Ajay, Wendy, thanks for joining us here today.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you. Look forward to the discussion.
So I wanted to start by asking you, Ajay, because you have an extensive experience as a mariner, as a leader, ISO auditor with a lot of good experience. So tell us a little bit about some of these events that we've encountered recently. You wrote for our Auditor Online media brand about the Titan submersible disaster, of course, and you also wrote for us a little bit about the Boeing MAX 9, 737 MAX 9 blowout that we had on Alaskan Airlines earlier this year. So what can we learn from some of these things from a quality management system perspective?
So, Mike, Wendy, it's wonderful here to be together with you. I've thought about this many times, and our topic today is what auditing helps, or how auditing will help prevent tragedies. Well, auditing is not going to prevent the tragedies. It is what the leadership and the teams will do which will prevent the tragedy. After all, risk cannot be brought down to zero. Accidents will happen, and there are two stages. And very often these two stages are mixed up and forgotten. For example, there is the auditing and there is the inspecting. Auditing is looking at the process. And though it is a repetition, I would like to repeat this, that the processes will result in a product. And our hope is, and of course, hope is never a plan, but our hope is that the process will result in a confirming product. So if Boeing has an accident, if the bridge collapses, if our poor kids will end up eating a sauce which will poison them, then the product is not confirming. Small things will occur. I wrote in that article on Titan, he did make mistakes. The owner went on to use a carbon hull. There is still investigation going on, but as subject matter experts, we can definitely, surely speculate a little. And I've shared my views even with the Coast Guard, etc. The thought being that you have changed from a Titanic metallic hull to a carbon hull when the carbon hull has not been proved. And how interesting, how small, that a good auditor could have challenged them at the process stage in design and development, clause 8.3, and asked questions, basic questions, things which are written in the standard, basic questions, that have you gone through these stages in changing over? But we see an owner who made sure that it was an American company. He used a Canadian platform to launch it, and he was in the international world. So no auditor can take care of that one clause, clause 512, customer focus. If the ownership, leadership, management is not going to be focused on the customer, there is very little the auditors can do. But I appreciate your topic on both these topics, that if the leadership were to take the inputs from the auditors seriously, it would help. And the second aspect, which is your topic, which is, could the auditors point out this? Yes, a little more boldness, ethics in doing the correct thing. Yes, in internal auditing, they may not use you again. There is that chance. You don't want to lose your bread and butter, but you're not doing your job also if you don't point out the process non-conformities. Non-conformity drives correction and corrective action. Non-conformity drives correction and corrective action. And looking ahead, the inspection should be even stricter because it is looking at the product. So why would the product go to a tragedy if the processes had worked, auditing had worked, and at the final stage, inspection had worked? I will say that for introduction, and then we will go more on it.
That was perfect because I wanted to bring in Wendy because what you didn't say in that, IJ, the kind of the elephant in the room, I guess, is risk. And I know we're going to get to risk because appreciating risk and understanding it is a big part of this. There's many industries where appreciable risk is certainly a major factor, but I struggle to think of many that have more impact potentially than the food supply. I mean, we had this other recent event that was well known where we had lead that found its way into applesauce. And apparently, as I was doing a little research about it for this session, so I think that it was a South American cinnamon manufacturer that provided the lead that found its way into these applesauce packets that sickened over 100 children. So, supply chains, risk. I mean, these are big issues. How do we appreciate that?
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Look, that's a great example, and I won't talk about that one because it's ongoing, and I don't have intimate knowledge. But picking up on the points that IJ are making, that point of inspection measurement as opposed to risk and auditing. I've seen where there are identified risks within a food chain where you know that there are things that could go wrong. And if I use the example of aflatoxin in peanuts, you know that at certain times of the year, the aflatoxin levels get high. And I'm aware of a recall that's happened in the last 48 hours here in New Zealand where the aflatoxin appears to have been tested for, and it was a known part of the regime, but the inspection outcome hasn't connected to the product use. Product has been released anyway, and now we have a recall because it's ended up in market. So back to IJ's point is that, the inspection itself or testing for something won't fix it. There's a process that needs to go with that, which is part of the auditing. But also, there are known risks. And I think that's where some of the magic happens with auditors is that auditors are likely to have exposure to other things that are happening in a timely manner. And when they come, they can raise questions about risk that perhaps those working in an insular smaller part of an ecosystem may overlook. So I think there is a place here to play, but I fully support what IJ is saying is that ultimately, having raised the risk, it's up to leadership in the site to manage and decide what it is they need to do.
So you see, Mike, Wendy has brought up something very good, and you asked me a very pertinent question. Why didn't I mention risk? And it was with intent I didn't mention risk. But if you recollect, I talked of clause 512. The main part of the customer focus is you must appreciate the risk in all aspects. You must appreciate the risk. If you recollect, remember, and I'm sure Wendy, who's a practitioner, knows the 7 basic principles. I teach auditors, I tell them you have been given the 7 basic principles of quality. I think customer focus, leadership, engagement of people, the process approach, continual improvement, evidence-based decision making, and relationship management. Now, if you look at that, the leadership should have been on top. It isn't. Right on top is customer focus. In effect, I would, through this media, this discussion, convey to the auditors, first understand, don't just go and ask questions. First understand what you want to ask if you want to be a good auditor. Has this management gone through those steps in determining what is customer focus? And the primary customer focus, be it food safety, be it a bridge collapsing, is, am I focused on the customer, client, warfighter, user? Am I focused? Only then I am a leader. That is why leadership is second. And then it says motivate your team, engagement of the people. How are you going to engage them if you yourself as leadership have not appreciated the risks? Risk is what is going to drive and let you guess the trends and predict what can go wrong. In the case of Titan, could they have predicted it will go wrong? Sure, 100%. He's using a hull which has not been tried. And Mike, if you show me that bridge collapsing, I'd like to make a point. I mean, to think that a ship hits into a bridge and the bridge collapses. Please look at this. Oh, this is already the collapse. Yeah, there. Please see. I mean, a ship at 20 knots, 30 knots? No, at 4 knots has an illusion with a bridge and the entire bridge collapses. After the collapse, they say ships, maybe 100 plus, have been locked up inside. It's a busy harbor. By basic permutations and combinations, any auditor could have asked questions under 512, 6.1 risk, or in the maritime ISM code, that is the Maritime Safety Code, standard equivalent to 9001, clause 8, hazardous situations. That is there a probability that a ship will impact? What will be the main speed? If everything worked and if they had stopped the engine also, the collision will be at 3-4 knots. Have you designed the bridge correctly? How is it that an entire bridge, as you saw from the picture, will collapse? How is it that the entire system fails? So yes, my point to the point is that can the auditors ask questions, pertinent questions on risk? Can they engage the teams? Can they use the process approach? Can there be improvements? Sure. If they capture the evidence in that auditing, I think is the value from this, a lesson to be learned on good auditing.
Management is ultimately going to decide what to do. I mean, certainly if nonconformities exist and you lose your certification to a certain standard, that's an issue. But in terms of expense to perhaps fix a bridge or error-proof a bridge, someone has to make a decision to spend that money. Now, lives were lost. We've talked about this offline a bit, that the value of a life is immeasurable. Unfortunately, is that always the consideration? What can an auditor do about it is the big takeaway.
I think one of the things that I was just reflecting on as IJ was talking there was that even just asking the question as the auditor, and I've been at the receiving end of this a number of times, is questioning whether or not the right people have been involved in a risk assessment when one's been done, challenging the robustness of the risk assessment as to whether or not the right level of inputs were available so that good decisions could be made. And I guess the other reflection I had is that at least there's an audit happening if we're discussing auditors helping, because I guess in the case of Titan there was no open floor, there was no listening to a potential auditor. So the very fact that the auditors have come is just such a wonderful first step, and there's huge value in that. So questions in and around the quality and having the right people involved would be of value as well.
Wendy, I totally agree with you. It's very simple. I like to go back to the basics for the benefit of the auditors. Don't just audit the do stage of the PDCA cycle. Don't just audit the do stage of the PDCA cycle. Plan, do, check, act, PDCA. It's the plan stage. If the plan stage itself is wrong, how do you expect the do stage to work? Remember that the auditors come at the check stage, which is much after the P and D. You already put the P in place, you put the D in place. If there itself you have made blunders and you have tried to, nickel and dime in not getting a good plan in place, and then you have implemented it, and you expect magic at the check stage, it ain't gonna happen. It ain't gonna happen. Of course, management commitment is vital. They have to balance the needs of the shareholders and stakeholders. That is why I say an auditor has to have the integrity. The auditor cannot improve the system. The auditor can provide the inputs correctly and honestly. The management has to make the decision. But the auditing questions and the auditing report that is put up by them is all that we are discussing, especially under the wonderful umbrella of exemplar global leader in this whole discussion. In the sense, let's get auditors who are bold enough to put up the correct inputs. Let the management make the decision. They will make mistakes. Accidents will occur. Pressures will be there. Money has to be made in a capitalistic society. But they have a right to at least give it to them if it is a right, so that the management can make a wise decision on customer focus and what is an advantage, so the bridges don't collapse, our children don't get poisoned, ports can continue to work. I mean, those ships have to come in the port, but you have to make a bridge which will not collapse, or mark out a full channel, put barriers so they cannot approach the bridge. The ship can, I don't know, I'm not an expert in every subject, but definitely we can look at it in the process stage and make a better design that it doesn't happen. And in this, it's a tool, but I would introduce FMEA, failure mode effect analysis. Good auditors, when they are looking at the risk, they should recommend OFI, opportunity for improvement. You see a big risk, put a line. I suggest. You don't have to do it. It's only a suggestion. He's an internal auditor. I suggest an FMEA be carried out.
Is that personality type is important. That has to be the type of person that has to have the persistence to carry that message and potential, what that failure mode does look like, what the effect of that will potentially look like. I mean, if you do your FME properly, as I understand it, you have a kind of an understanding of the severity as well as the potentiality of a certain event occurring. So as I mentioned, you need to have a certain personality type to do this work where you're going to carry the message and make sure it's heard. Is that a fair statement, Wendy?
Yeah, look, it is for me. And again, just reflecting on the value of raising something as a risk assessment and a robust risk assessment being required, as opposed to mandating a particular solution. And again, it's something that, you and I have discussed in previous sessions, Mike, is around, it's a capitalist society. There is a limited amount of money. So if an auditor focuses on one particular thing and sort of insists on a given solution, what that's doing then is taking away the ability to put that in the right position of risk against other priorities that the organisation has. And it sort of brings it to this, and it's something, IJ, that you talked about in previous sessions as well, around looking at the big picture. So it's not just tunnel vision and you have to do this, this one thing. It's around understanding actually in the big scheme of things, how much is there that's going on and what is the right balance in the right place. And again, that comes back to risk and having the right people involved in the right inputs, as opposed to mandating, like you say, the dolphins in the channel to prevent the bridge being hit. That may or may not be the right solution. So you wouldn't want to mandate that. You would want to mandate a discussion on the risks and a suitable solution.
I agree with you. Wendy, we must leave it to the subject matter experts. But as auditors, we must ask the relevant questions. Can we interfere? It is not the job of the auditor to decide, oh, this is too expensive. It's not your problem. This we have to say. You would say in any mature discussion, people tell me, hey, but you can't say money doesn't matter. I say to auditors, yes, it doesn't matter to you as an auditor, because you must bring up, you are obligated to bring up the truth of the situation. Let the leadership take the management decision on this. Let the leadership take the management decision on this. What do they want to do? But you must truthfully, ethically raise the risk and give them the input in that audit report. Remember, 922 requires a documented audit report. I see nowadays audits with only non-conformities attached and no audit report. It's a mandatory requirement. Just do your job. Just do your job and leave it to the management to decide. And one small thing to add to that is the management does not have to do everything that the auditor says. It is an internal audit. It is an internal audit. But at least take the input, be aware of it. Take this analogy of a Marine Corps colonel right in front, face of the enemy. And I was asked this question with the Army, are we going to use ISO 9001? I said, why not? He said, these guys will come. I will never attack against odds. I'm trying to defend the nation. I don't care about all this. I said, sure, but first appreciate the risk. Know the risk. I'm not saying don't attack. Say yes, 80% of my troops will be killed, but it's a national thing. I will go. But don't go without knowing that 80% of them will be killed, isn't it? So these are the thoughts. You know, if you look at the charge of the Light Brigade, right into the valley of death, he didn't appreciate the risk. That's why we laugh at his bravery. But today, wiser heads will appreciate the risk. The bridge can collapse.
Yeah.
That is the thought. The Titan will implode. The applesauce may kill the children. And aren't they repeating it? Remember the old metal toys, the guns with the lead paint
Lead
done in
paint.
somewhere
Oh,
abroad?
right. Yeah.
What is the difference between the two? It's the same thing. Did we learn a lesson? Did we see that people outside may not have the same values? Their kids are dying. It doesn't make them less. We are not being heartless as Americans or otherwise. All that we are saying is for everybody, appreciate the risk. It's a global economy. And Exemplar Global works internationally. Let us try to bring the awareness that risk appreciation, honestly presented, doesn't mean you have to do everything, but accept it. Don't say we didn't know.
Well, let me ask you this: is there a level of responsibility? Is there a level of insight, perhaps, that an internal auditor maybe can bring to this process that a third party auditor cannot? What are your thoughts on that?
So I will, with your permission, Wendy, and all of you, comment a little bit on this. Third-party audits are good. Certification is good. But one thing we must remember, and Exemplar Global has a wide spectrum of training, internal auditor. The purpose of the third-party audit is not to improve the system. It is to gather the documentation and the proof and be able to justify the certificate they give. The objective is different. And that is why we emphasize internal audits. Here, I would also, as an addition to those who will listen to this, that internal audits must be strengthened. And it is a poor thing when the management say, I don't want a non-conformity in the certifying body's audit. Can you audit like the certifying body? That's a waste of an audit. Don't worry, let them do their job to collect the documentation. Your job as an internal audit is to actually internally audit to see that the process-based management system will work and result in a conforming product and a service. You don't worry about what the third-party auditor will say. But if you strengthen this, in retrospect, it will automatically take care of the third party also. Automatically, when the third party gives you non-conformities, accept them and you will take care. They may improve your system. But the principle of the two audits is different. And this is a wonderful discussion you have raised as Exemplar Global, that how can we contribute to the understanding of the auditors on what is their responsibility? Please don't think of third-party auditors. Management systems auditing should not be designed to remain certified, but to ensure that we will produce a conforming product and a service. And that is the difference vis-a-vis the risk appreciation, improvement of the system, producing a conforming product.
It's a really interesting reflection, IJ, and I'm thinking back to your question, Mike, around the personality of the auditors. And I think one of the challenges that internal auditors can sometimes face is the people that they're having conversations with. Perhaps there's a rank or a power difference, or a perceived rank or power difference that makes them feel that they can't raise things, or that things have always been done that way, and so on. So that does bring in different barriers to the internal auditors, and you're quite right, Mike. I think we need to have consideration to what is it, the skills or the strength or the personality that would make a good internal auditor, because they may need to have courage to have conversations that perhaps they wouldn't have otherwise. And I think also, just thinking about different departments, different risks, that same thinking around integration, around understanding the bigger process, and not just auditing, one packing line in one location, but actually understanding how does the whole business work, how does the whole supply chain work, so that if procurement changes the source, the cinnamon coming from a different supply, what impact does that have on inwards goods, or the facilities where it's imported? What does that mean for quality assurance? What does it mean for inspection? How is the product used if we change the recipe, and how much cinnamon is used? Does that then put it over the limit where it isn't if it was, using a smaller amount? So the internal auditors do have a different skill set, and that I think you're quite right, OJ. They are a key part to that risk and understanding, particularly in and around change, which is often where things go wrong, is that we've made a change, and that the repercussions of that haven't been thought through.
I was trying to emphasize this, that Example Global has a chance now to be a leader, to say that we need strengthening in internal auditors. Somehow
right.
the internal auditors think they are second fiddle to the certifying body auditor. No, these are apples and oranges.
Yes.
These are apples
Agreed.
and oranges, the two different objectives. Get down to your business, and we want you to raise the non-conformities so that we can improve the system. Once the system is functioning, the certifying body will also certify it. It's only a piece of paper to do business. But this is the bloodline, which is that the management system must work. And the leaders should be educated. We do a lot of consulting. I mean, I don't want to name it in a forum. It looks like I'm making a sale. But large organizations run on a system designed by a team that I have headed. And there, when I talk to the leadership, I do a course called, for QMII, Awareness Leaders Workshop, People Processes. And in that Awareness Leaders Workshop, when I do consulting, I tell the leaders, I need you for half a day to do a workshop with me. Yes, everybody down the line, the quality managers, the auditors will do. But you too need to know how will you contribute. And that is that half day, 1 day course, depending on the time they give. That what do you have to do? What do you have to do is either accept the risk, bypass it, but don't shut it down. Don't go and say, please don't tell me. Let's keep quiet about it. That is Boeing's problem. That is Boeing's problem. So these are the thoughts. The leadership may let down, but then the auditors also let down because they stopped raising the issues.
There's two questions that come to mind from that, IJ, and Wendy, and this is kind of for you, Wendy. Is first of all, is the idea of culture, and how do you audit culture and understand culture? That's a very important one. But also closely tied in with that, Wendy, is this idea of supply chain audits, which I think are a very, very big issue, obviously in food production. And we saw it again with the applesauce and the cinnamon, because it was a supplier that the applesauce that caused the issue. So that's kind of almost like a hybrid role between internal audits and third-party audits, right? Is you're auditing a company that's intrinsically key to your production, yet it's not your company. It's not even in your country, maybe in many cases, especially with these supply chains we have in the food industry, for instance. So what does that role look like? What is the supply chain auditor's responsibility to manage risk and audit against risk?
Thanks, Mike. Actually, that's a really good question. And funnily enough, I suspect that certainly it has been in my experience, and probably in other areas, that it's the second party auditors that are looking at the supply chain are often the best at doing risk, because they understand that that's what they're there for. They're there to ensure that this other outfit that they're engaging with isn't going to damage their own organization's brand and reputation, and that they can rely on what is being sent to them. So second party audits that I've done, second party audits that I've been a recipient of, very much focused on risk and understanding risk and the implications of our changes on them and vice versa. So that I suspect that's probably the strongest that I've seen as far as having good conversations around risk go.
Yeah.
So, Mike, I would like to add to what Wendy said, and she's put it in the clear perspective and very rightly. So, integrated approach to auditing is most important. And a lot of the supply chain auditing is being done ISO 28,000 security of the supply chain, OSHAs. We do them separately because we specialize separately. Maybe Exemplar Global can look at a requirement where at least 3-4 main principled these standards are used as an integrated approach, maybe a new idea to think about. It is important because risks are spread across the standard. For example, I'll give you a humorous example. I went to an institute, doesn't matter which kind, military, otherwise civilian, and I went and asked, they were certified to 4 standards. ISO 9001, actually aerospace, to 9100, which is like 9001. They were certified to 14,001. They were certified to OSHAS and 28,001, security of the supply chain. So to cut it short and make the point, the gentleman, the CEO, I was about to say rank, had signed all 4. But I was the first one who took all 4 and went to him. I said, sir, there are contradictions between your 4 policies. He said, there are 4 departments. They brought it to me. Separately, I approved all 4. But the point is, therefore, those who are the working, I asked the men, I asked the workers, I said, which one do you follow? They said, we know which audit is coming and we answer questions accordingly. So you're not following any of it because security and efficiency can be at loggerheads. OSHAS may have requirements which contradict. Therefore, my point is auditors, and more than the auditors, the top managements have to weigh the risk across the standards. Not only must we do things safely, but we have to be productive. We have to keep it secure. We must not pollute the atmosphere or the Mother Earth. How do you put it all together? Unless the leadership thinks like that. And if the auditors don't raise questions on this across the board, the leadership doesn't think like that. That was an institute where the standards had been implemented over the years, but nobody had put all 4 together to ask them a question. And it's a chemical, industry kind of related industry. The implications can be very dangerous, where your efficiency, which is money making, is at conflict with, say, health and safety or with security. And therefore, we need to propagate an integrated approach to management. At least the auditors should look at the wider, complete prospect of how the company is actually meeting its risk obligation.
The excellent point, IJ, and I think that example you gave, unfortunately, I think is not uncommon. I think that there's a lot of well, which auditor is coming. That's how I determine what I'm following now. I mean, there's so much. There's so much psychology that goes into this. As much as it's a technical business where we think that it's in black and white, it's in the standard. You follow the standard, and if you don't, you get the nonconformities. But it's a very emotional, psychological, sociological experiment. This work that you guys do, I would say.
Yeah.
And I agree with you. So you see, Mike, I've got that on my QMII website. a people process system approach with the auditors to say, don't leave each separate. People process system approach is a combined approach. You have to see all of them function. You need the competency, you need everything. You. What about him, her? So you need them safe also. So you have to look at the totality and ask the questions that the risks are covered. It's important to remember that if, for example, and I'm saying it generically, if 9001 talks of safety, he's not talking of safety of the person. He's talking of safety of the product. It has to be remembered because ISO 9001 is a capitalistic standard. It doesn't care about what will happen to Mother Earth, this, etc. He's going to give you the product you want with efficiency. Therefore, you have to balance it with the OHS standard, the environmental 14001 standard. You have to balance it with the security standard. These are different things. And when you look at the supply chain, the totality, if it is affected upstream, it will have effects downstream. If that somebody in some country puts that cinnamon with with lead in it just to sell his cinnamon, he doesn't know downstream a kid could be dead or damaged or brain affected forever. That guy doesn't know. But we know, and that is why the standard is very particular. You have to, when you say customer requirements, and I say to all your auditors, remember, customer requirements include stated, unstated, and regulatory. There are three aspects to it. We just audit the stated requirement. The customer said this. Well, the customer could be saying something ridiculous because he or she doesn't know any better. But you are the subject matter expert. You are manufacturing that aircraft. You are going to put it there. Somebody could die. And therefore, auditors must have the ability to appreciate the risk and consider the unstated risks also and be sure about the regulatory.
So Wendy, as we get kind of towards the close of this session, I want to kind of ask you, and I'll ask both of you, but Wendy, I want to start with you. On a high level, what do we want to say to those of us that have spent their time with us here this last half hour? What do we want to urge them to do? What guidance or what advice would you offer to somebody who's listening to this and saying, well, I want to help my organizations that I work with do better, have better outputs? How do we help encourage them to do that? How can they help themselves do that for their organization?
Thanks, Mike. Look, I think for me, there's such huge value in the internal audits, and there's huge value in asking the questions. And some of the most spectacularly useful, helpful audits that I've been in is when auditors have had the discussion. Start with simple questions like, I wonder what would happen if, and have you thought about? And I don't see them ask one person, they ask many people, to the point where you think you're about to answer the question for them because maybe they didn't hear you, and then you realize actually this is a very good auditor who is testing not just one person's understanding of a situation, but testing with many. And I think that skill of being open and asking the question with I wonder if, or what might happen. I think just if there was nothing else, if just a little bit more of that happened more broadly, I think there's some value there.
My thought, Mike, is like I've already said, but I would happy to sum it up. Non-conformity drives correction and corrective action. Data drives risk and trends. And good auditing would be to look at both aspects. Remember the PDCA cycle like I've mentioned. Don't miss out on the plan stage auditing. It's very important part of the auditing. Please also remember, risk cannot be brought down to zero. Risks will exist, but bold auditing is my recommendation. In bold auditing, I would like to repeat the definition of a non-conformity. Non-conformity is the non-fulfillment of a requirement. Don't audit to your experience, to your whims and fancies. A lot of auditors are doing this. I see that because of my 30-year experience. for God's sake, keep your experience in your pocket and show us the requirement. So be a good auditor by knowing the requirement. And to that, I will say 19011 now allows you hypothetical questions after the 9/11 tragedies. Don't be reluctant to ask a hypothetical question to pinpoint a risk under clause 6.1 or in a industry specific standard 6.1 and 8.1 or in maritime 8 hazardous situations clause 8. My point being, pinpoint the risks. It's not for you to see the economic value and say, how will they do it? That is the management's problem. And therefore, my summing, be a bold, good auditor. But bold, good doesn't mean your opinion. Stick to requirements. Where data is showing you a tragedy in the making, there is a requirement. They don't have a requirement, for example, the organization, but you have 6.1 risk. They should at least appreciate the risk. So these are some of my recommendations. And to Exemplar Global, encourage integrated management systems, integrated auditing, and to Exemplar Global, encourage these guys, support them. They need to become bolder to do what they have to do so that whatever, as a great institute, Exemplar Global can, years and years. I have worked for almost 30 years with RAB QSA Exemplar Global, and I think it's the finest body. And you need to encourage these people. You need to encourage these guys to understand that you are not the certifying body. You are looking at the internal audit, internally strengthen the processes. The outcomes will be correct. Confirming products will be there. And in the bargain, the certifying bodies will also be satisfied. Don't start with the certifying body. Don't emulate and mirror them. Then why do we want internal audits? Why do we need internal audits? Thank you.
Well, you two, I have to say, you're my heroes. You did a great job with that session today. There it is, as I just was saying. This is how auditing helps prevent tragedy. IJ, Aurora, Wendy, Edwards, great job from both of you. Really appreciate your time today going through that. I think all of our viewers appreciate it as well. So thank you for that. This expo is available on demand. But if you have questions, I want to encourage you to write us at info@exemplarglobal.org. We'll get your questions right out to IJ or Wendy or any of us on the Exemplar Global team. If you want to kind of comment on some of the things that you saw or some ideas you may have out there, we'd love to hear your thoughts. So please take advantage of that, and also get your CPD for this session. You're entitled to CPD for watching this session here at the Excellence in Auditing Expo 2024. So check that out and do that. And thanks again, Wendy and IJ. Great job as always. Thank you both for being here. Really appreciate your time today.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Wendy. Great.
Thank you. Thank you both. All right, and thank you all for being here too. And check out the other sessions we have for you here at the Expo. We have 2 weeks of great content for you, so check it all out. And we'll look forward to seeing you at the next session here at Exemplar Global's Excellence in Auditing Expo 2024. So long.